Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into a brand new edition of the Fantasy Roundup. I'm your host, Spencer the Guru, Urquhart here with my loyal co-host, Gabe Henderson. What's up, man?
Just getting ready for the draft. Nervous, excited, all the emotions bundled into one. Finally here.
Right. Yeah, only 2 days away, all the NFL draft, and that's what we're going to mainly be talking about here today, where the top fantasy football rookies are going to land. You know, we'll talk about where we want them to land from a fantasy football perspective, as well as where we think they're going to land, because sometimes you want a player to go to a certain team, but it doesn't always happen the way we want. So we're going to have our predictions here, and we can hope, we can have our wishes too. So we're going to have our predictions on all that here in a few. We've also got fantasy basketball DFS tips for y'all that those that are looking to get in on tonight's NBA playoff slate over on, whatever DFS platform you use. And speaking of sports books and platforms to bet, we like to shout out our sponsor, Caesars Sportsbook. Make sure to head on over to Caesars to take advantage of the new offer, risk-free first bet offer if you haven't already, if you're looking to sign up. So shout out to our partners at Caesars. And yeah, and we'll also have our live Bayou Bets draft show on Thursday. That's going to be a lot of fun live on these same channels. I'll be live at the Saints facility. Gabe's going to be sweating it out for the Texans' first two picks. So, yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun on Thursday, but we got to get this fantasy talk in here today. So let's talk about our headlines here for today. And the big elephant in the room, the domino finally fell. We had been assuming it would, but it finally did. Aaron Rodgers has officially been traded to the New York Jets. It's finally done. He's out of Green Bay officially for the first time in his long-tenured NFL career. We'll have a little more on that before we get to the draft talk. And speaking of draft, Will Levis, Gabe's favorite quarterback, I say that sarcastically, but his draft odds continue to surge. I don't know why. I'm kind of with Gabe on Levis. Gabe's got a whole rant prep for Levis at the end of the show for those that want to stick around for that. But yeah, it's just his odds continue to surge. He's now, according to the odds, in the mix to not only go second, but first overall, which I find absolutely absurd. But we'll break that down here in a little bit. Bijan Robinson, his stock going up, the number one running back in the class. Now favored to be a top 10 pick. He's the favorite to go 8th to the Falcons. We'll have more on Bijan when we get to the running back talk. And in the Kings, De'Aaron Fox, speaking of NBA, they don't play tonight, but De'Aaron Fox, one of their key players, doubtful for Game 5 with a fractured finger. But the but here is that Fox himself came out today and said that he plans to play. So even though he's listed as doubtful, sounds like De'Aaron Fox might give it a go, in which case the Kings would, even with Fox on a bum finger, he gives them a pretty good shot to take down the Warriors, I'd say. But I want to get your thoughts on Rodgers, Gabe. What did you think of the trade? Do you think it was fair compensation? And do you feel like that Rodgers will do well on the Jets?
I think Green Bay got away with a lot, as long as Rodgers plays 65% of the snaps for the Jets next season, which presumably he will, barring an injury. They get another first rounder next year. I think this late in the process, Green Bay got a lot back for Rodgers. And you know what? I'm actually going to flip it back to you, Spencer. I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do the Jets have to win a Super Bowl with Rodgers to make this trade successful?
That's a tough question. I would say at least an AFC championship appearance, to where I would say if as long as they make the AFC championship, it's not a failure. I mean, anything less than that, you got to grade it at a D or an F. Even if they make the playoffs, that's still, when you trade for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, your goal is the Super Bowl, like the Bucs did with Tom Brady, and that worked out. So the Jets are trying to follow a similar blueprint. So if they win the Super Bowl, that's an A. they reach a Super Bowl and lose it, that's like a B, C, depending on, probably it's still a B. And then an AFC Championship appearance, I guess you can still say a C. It's like, it's not what we wanted, but it's at least we've made a deep run, way deeper than we've have recently. But anything short of that, it's a failure. So yeah, the bar is set really high, putting a lot of pressure on what's essentially a young team there in New York, a very talented team. But I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where you have the opportunity. So to me, you got to swing. I can't say it was a bad deal for them, but yeah, I think the Packers probably won the deal slightly because they're slick. They're not an organization that you're gonna get over on. Gunakinst, I think's his name. I probably butchered it there, but the new GM over there, he's cut from that same cloth. Like the Packers executives, they're like they don't play. And it's a very like family oriented thing. It's like the fans still have stock in the team and all that. Like they're not gonna just go away. The Green Bay Packers are gonna be relevant within the next year or two again. I think this year is gonna be a rough year, with Jordan Love, his first year as a starter. So this year, Packers fans can expect a double-digit loss season. But I think long term, this is a win for the Packers. Short term, obviously, favors the Jets, but this could really hinder the Jets' long-term outlook because they've got a lot of young talent, like we said, and you bring in Rodgers there, it's kind of an awkward fit to where the talent's there, so it might work. But if you come up short of at least an AFC title appearance, you're gonna be left holding the bag because then Rodgers is gonna retire. You're gonna have all the dead cap and you're gonna have all this talent, but you're not gonna be able to build around it very well. So very risky on the Jets' part, but could pay off. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, I think you make great points. I see this as a huge win for Green Bay because in tying this into the fantasy aspect, because we're in the Fantasy Roundup, Jordan Love has been sitting behind Rodgers for years, and Green Bay is excited to see what they have in him. So they got back a huge return. They're going to be able to build that offense. We're going to really get to see what they're all about there in Green Bay, and it's going to be a whole new look, whole new era.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a new era, and a lot of new weapons there. And yes, we will have some good info today. We plan on it. Take it for what it's worth. But yeah, we plan to bring the heat here on the Fantasy Roundup. I guess one final thing before we move on from Rodgers is that the Jets have a lot more talent than Green Bay. Let's be real. The Jets really hit on their draft class last year. Green Bay's draft class, outside of Christian Watson, I mean, they had a lot of draft capital last year, but they spent it mainly on defense. So it's like their defense kind of in a rebuilding phase. And with Rodgers' big salary number, they weren't really able to add anything in free agency. So they basically, by doing the trade now, I think they're just going to eat all the Rodgers dead cap this year, just basically take an L for this year and then reload for 2024, and then hopefully by then Love he'll be on his 5th-year option. Then he'll have a lot to prove, and if he does well that year, he'll probably get an extension and be their QB of the future. And then it's one of those things, if they really stink and they feel like Love's just not the answer, then they'll have probably a really high draft pick to then move on for 24 and get Caleb Williams potentially, or Drake May, whoever would fall in their lap. I doubt they'll do bad enough to get Caleb Williams because they still have some talent on that team. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. If I'm a Packers fan, I'm being patient. I'm accepting that this season's probably a loss, but I feel like the future there is pretty bright because that's a big haul for a 39-year-old quarterback. I know he's a 4-time MVP, but the fact is he's almost 40 years old and did show signs of decline last year.
Yeah, for sure. And, like you mentioned, Green Bay's now got to hit it out of the park in the draft. I'm not going to take credit for this idea because obviously it's been circulated over the last few days, but how funny would it be if Green Bay goes receiver in the first round?
They very well might. Their tight end room is bare.
Yeah, it would just be so funny, and it would be one last middle finger to Aaron Rodgers.
They probably will, honestly. Look at the Seahawks last year. Russell Wilson leaves. They finally beef up their offensive line. They get 2 stud tackles in the draft. So this year, watch Green Bay will probably get a couple of stud weapons there because that's just the way it seems to go a lot of times. When it's like when the big money quarterback leaves, and it's like, well, we've got all this space now. We're going to be able to build every position but the quarterback and hope the replacement does well, which in Seattle's case worked like a charm because Geno Smith was a ready-made starter. Not saying Jordan Love's going to be like that because, I mean, the fact is Geno, even though he's a backup all those years, had experience where Love has only been in the league 3 years. I doubt he's just going to come in there like gangbusters, but I guess you never know. Christian Watson's a nice weapon. Maybe Green Bay will surprise us, but I feel like it's going to be a rough year in year one of the new era there. But enough Rodgers talk. Let's move on to the NBA DFS slate here. Got some values for y'all real quick before we break down these draft prospects. I've got a Terrence Mann of the Clippers as my value because Kawhi Leonard's out again. Could have put that on the headlines, but didn't put it because it's like, well, we already know, duh, Kawhi Leonard, that guy. I mean, he has the least little thing, he's out. I mean, he does not play through pain whatsoever to where it's like guys like Terrence Mann are forced to step up. Norman Powell's the one that's really stepped up lately, him and Russell Westbrook, but their prices reflect that. Russell Westbrook, not a value at all. He's now the highest priced point guard in the slate, and rightfully so because he's going to get so much volume. The books aren't stupid. They make adjustments. But to me, the name they're kind of sleeping on here is Terrence Mann. You can get him pretty cheap there at 4,700. Should get a lot of usage. The Clippers love running those small 5-guard lineups, and Mann should be very much a part of that and score a lot as they look to keep up with Phoenix.
Yeah, no, I think Terrence Mann's a good pick. Obviously, Russell Westbrook doesn't have the same value that he did, as you mentioned. His values, there's numbers have skyrocketed. I think he was there at 9,000, which, as you mentioned, is the most expensive, as he should be. So I think if you're looking to go with a value pick, Terrence Mann's a great pick.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's worth paying up for the stars. I mean, look at last night, Jimmy Butler, his crazy night. Although it's like, I mean, Giannis was the highest priced guy, and he didn't do as well. So, like, you never know. But, the key is you got to hit on at least 1 or 2 stars, and then the rest of your lineup, you build around those couple stars. You just got to get these value guys like a Terrence Mann, or in your case, Gabe, a Marcus Smart there at 6,000.
Yeah, I really like Marcus Smart. It's a big game for Boston, and Marcus Smart has really doubled his output over the last few games. He's hovering around that 20 points a game range, which is, like I just said, almost double from his 11.5 points a game. He's getting some more assists, getting some more rebounds, contributing everywhere, really. And he's taking more threes. He's hit 3 threes in his last 2 games as well. So I just think the boom potential there for Marcus Smart is really there.
100%. Yeah, because the Celtics, I mean, they have a pretty deep lineup, but they tend to go with usually the same core group of guys with, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. And as far as a number 3 scorer, don't really have a true guy for that. But a lot of times Marcus Smart ends up filling that role. He's more of an assist guy. But good afternoon to you too, Jerry. Thank you for tuning in. But yeah, Marcus Smart, though, is I think a pretty good value at 6,000 because it's like a Celtics. I think they're going to boat race the Hawks tonight.
So do I.
And the 13-point spread, though, a little wide. Couldn't quite put them for daily best bets. Ended up going with the Nuggets for that. They were -10 as opposed to -13. I felt like there was a little bit more value there because I think the Nuggets are going to also clean the Timberwolves out. I think all 3 of these series end tonight. I think the Clippers are the only underdog that has a slight chance just because they're so well coached with Ty Lue. But I feel like it's like David versus Goliath. And in this case, it's like, unless there's an intervention, which I don't see it, I don't think anyone's going to come in to save the Clippers. The Clippers are the league's whipping boy. They're gonna fall short too. I think all of these Suns, Celtics, Nuggets all move on to the next round. But let's move on now to the NFL draft talk, y'all. Quarterbacks, wherever will the top quarterbacks go? We all the quarterbacks, the funnest position to speculate about for fantasy football, considering the quarterback affects every other skill player on their respective team. And we're going to skip Bryce Young, even though the reports this morning about Will Levis potentially being the number 1 pick. I don't know about you, Gabe, but I'm not buying that one bit. These freaking Redditors, man, they put this stuff out there and people really start to buy it. I mean, it's like the crypto thing. It's like it puts something on Reddit and people go goo over it, and then it just inflates the value of something that's really worthless. And I'm not saying Will Levis is completely worthless, but as far as the number one pick, I mean, that's insane. So we're gonna skip over that. Bryce Young, he's going to the Panthers. I mean, I think that, and I kind of want that because I feel like Bryce Young for fantasy would be the best fit over there in Carolina. But let's talk Levis, though. I know you've got some more thoughts on him later, but I see you gave it. You think he's going to the Colts, but want him to go to the Raiders. Why is that?
I think there's been too much smoke around with him and the Colts this offseason. I think the Colts really want him. They're infatuated with him. I don't know if they'll trade up for him. I don't know if that's something the Texans would potentially do, trade up at 2, because like you mentioned, the number 1 pick is going to be Bryce Young. It always has been. It's going to be on Thursday. But I think Levis to the Colts make too much sense. So don't really need to waste any more time there. As far as what I want for him, I mean, everyone knows I don't love Will Levis, like Spencer alluded to. More on that later. But the one thing you can't knock Will Levis on, he's got a huge arm. And when you're looking at these quarterback needy teams in the top 10, nobody has a better receiving core than the Raiders. Maybe, arguably, the Seahawks. But I really like the Raiders' threats. And I think if you want to have Will Levis succeed from a fantasy standpoint, the Raiders have the receiving core to get that done.
Right, yeah, they've got a pretty nice receiving core there, of course, anchored by Devontae Adams, and they brought in Jacoby Myers as well. Go at Hunter Renfrow. They lost Darren Waller, but, I mean, Jacoby Myers, he should absorb a lot of those targets, and they'll probably draft another weapon or two, maybe a tight end to replace Waller. So, yeah, I mean, Levis to the Raiders would be intriguing. And just with Garoppolo there, though, he probably wouldn't see the field in year 1, where with the Colts, assuming he goes there, he'd probably get to start right away because Gardner Minshew, I don't think they didn't sign him to start, where Garoppolo, he money. But it'll be interesting. I think Levis, I don't love the guy, but I think wherever he goes, it could be interesting for fantasy because of that big arm. I think he'll be able to have some upside receivers. But speaking of the Colts, I think that Will Levis, I know you're going to hate me for this, Gabe. I think the Will Levis to the Texans thing's probably going to happen because it's just one of those things where I don't think they're going to want to let him get to the Colts. Division rivals like to block each other. In this case, I think the Texans are going to be like, well, Colts want Will Levis, we're going to take him instead because it's the way things are trending. CJ Stroud, who I'm about to get to, his stock's trending down, Levis trending up. So I personally think Texans go with Levis. I'm going to buy the odds on that, but let's hope for Gabe's sake I'm wrong. But move on to Stroud. I'm going to go with the Colts for him. I think he'd be a pretty good fit over there in Shane Steichen's offense. Probably be a rough rookie year, probably be a lot of growing pains. So I don't really want it for fantasy. I'd actually prefer Stroud go to the Texans because I think in that system it would be like a Kyle Shanahan-esque system with, DeMeco Ryans coming over, and then the Texans OC cut from that same cloth, being a former 49ers assistant. I think in that system he'd be a little bit better of a fit, and I think he's had more potential for growth over there with the Colts. It's a run-heavy scheme, with Jonathan Taylor, and it's like, I don't know, I'm just not really excited about the Colts right now. The Texans, I know their roster is still kind of rough, but I mean, they did sign some interesting pieces this offseason, enough to where I'm a little more intrigued by them. So for a prospect like Stroud, I kind of hope he ends up in Houston.
No, I mean, as a Houston fan, I want CJ Stroud to end up in Houston. Little interesting nugget. I know we've talked about Will Levis and his odds. He's no longer the favorite to go number 2. So just thought I'd throw that in there.
Okay, that's news. And I'm guessing a defensive player is now favored, either Wilson or Anderson.
Yeah, it's Tyree Wilson at plus 140 at Caesars. They downgraded Will Levis to plus 170.
Okay, well, in that case, I tell you what, I still think then Stroud goes to the Colts, because then I think if the Texans pass on him, then they either the Colts trade up to 3 to ensure they get Stroud, or Levis, or I still think Stroud. I know I'm going to contradict myself here about this trending thing, but I feel like, though, with all this pre-draft stuff, a lot of it's just, as Jim likes to say, horse hockey, to where I still think Stroud is the number 2 on most people's boards. So I'm going to stick with that and say he goes to the Colts. Where Levis, I mean, if he falls a little bit, he might fall into the lap of the Raiders at 7, but if they pass on it, might end up with the Titans at 11 or the Texans at 12. And speaking of the Titans, let's talk Anthony Richardson. Could be a candidate to go there. I see you want him there, Gabe. I think he's going to go to the Seattle Seahawks instead.
Yeah, I think for the Seahawks, it's a perfect situation for Anthony Richardson. I mean, he's this athletic specimen, but he's really inexperienced. So all the talk around him is he can be great, but he can't start right away. You need 1 to 2 years. He's only got 1 year of starting experience under his belt. So if he goes to the Seahawks, I know you mentioned Geno earlier. It's Geno's team. But I think Anthony Richardson can sit back for a year, 2 years behind him if the Seahawks take him, and the Seahawks suddenly have their quarterback of the future. So I think that would make a lot of sense for the Seahawks to reach for someone like Anthony Richardson, who can be a superstar, but who isn't. The Seahawks are a team who don't need him right now.
Right. Yeah.
I want him to go to the Titans. I mean, as a Texans fan, I don't really want to see it, but for fantasy, Anthony Richardson to the Titans would just make that team so much more interesting. And come on, I'm just going to say this. Anthony Richardson, Derrick Henry in the same backfield.
Nasty.
Everyone gets excited for that prospect. I mean, come on.
Right. Yeah. I think that would be a good fit. I actually think that's where he goes. I think the Seahawks, they're in a win now window with Geno being over 30 years old. And Pete Carroll, let's be real, Pete Carroll is not getting any younger. I mean, he's one of the oldest coaches in the NFL. So to me, I don't see them going Richardson. I know a lot of mocks have him going there. I see the logic because it's like he can sit behind Geno for a year or 2. I just think if you're a team like the Seahawks with an old head coach and I don't want to say an aging roster, but a roster with a decent amount of veterans. I mean, he signed Bobby Wagner this offseason. I don't see them as a team that's going to be like, oh, we have a high pick. We're just going to look ahead. I think they're going to draft either Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson to bolster that defense because their defense was kind of lacking in pass rushing last year to where I think that's their biggest need. Quarterback's not a need for them in the immediate future because of Geno balling out last year, and he was a top 10 QB. So I'm thinking that that Richardson does end up in Tennessee, and in that case, it'll be pretty fun for fantasy because he might get some starts at some point. Ryan Tannehill's still there, but let's be honest, he's on the back nine of his career. His play was subpar at best last year, so I'm thinking he does well there, and and then they'll probably just either trade or cut Malik Willis. It's not like they invested a super high pick in him, and he looked horrendous last year. I mean, it's one thing to struggle, but that was poo, man. I mean, he made Zach Wilson look good. I mean, he was so bad last year in limited action. But anyway, speaking of, well, no, he didn't go to Tennessee. He was a Tennessee quarterback, so he played for the Titans. But Hendon Hooker went to Tennessee, and he's a 5th-year senior, so he's a little old for a prospect, and he's coming off a torn ACL, so has a lot of things going against him. But what he does have going for him is that prior to injury last year, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I mean, he had Tennessee at one point as a national title threat, especially after they beat Alabama. I mean, they got humbled against Georgia, but, I mean, no one beat Georgia last year. Georgia was just unbeatable. So Hendon Hooker, I think, gets drafted in either the 2nd or 3rd round, and to me, team that's a good fit for him, somewhere he could sit for a year and then take over next year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, the Bucs, I mean, you lost Tom Brady, but you brought Baker Mayfield in for this season, and I don't know about you, Gabe, but I really don't see Baker Mayfield being a starting QB in the NFL after this year. I think he's going to, take his licks in Tampa, and it'll be a rebuilding year for them. And then I think they draft a guy like Hooker, and then in 24, he could battle it out with Kyle Trask or whoever else they would decide to bring in. Maybe they'll bring Baker back if he does better than I'm thinking. And the reason why I want him there, I think that, I think he'll go there, but I want him there also because of the weapons Tampa Bay has. Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, even though they lost Tom Brady, they've still got an above average receiving core with those guys. And they've got them extended out to where they should be on the roster for at least the next 2 or 3 years, to where Hooker will have weapons to throw to once he gets a chance to play. So I'm thinking Tampa's a spot for him.
Yeah, and I was gonna bring up that point with Baker Mayfield. You never really know what he's gonna do with the weapons, and I think that point can be made about someone like Hendon Hooker as well. I think he'd really enjoy working with those guys, and I think any quarterback in the NFL would.
100%. Moving on now to running backs, we've got the man that everyone's drooling over, and rightfully so for those that love to evaluate prospects there, Bijan Robinson, who is just somebody that checks all the boxes. He's a complete 3-down back. He's tough and catch the ball. He just goal line. He does it all. So, which is why I'm thinking he goes to the Atlanta Falcons, because that's a team that's with a coach, Arthur Smith. He's a traditionalist, like run the ball, old school kind of football. We saw Tyler Algier, a freaking 5th-round rookie from last year, got over 1,000 yards. Goes to show how much they love to run the ball. And Algier was pretty solid, but is he someone you can trust as an every down back? I don't think so. He was good, but he's got some flaws, especially in the passing game, to where Cordero Patterson was still very involved. And I just think that with the way they do things over there with Arthur Smith, and plus Bijan will be a big ticket seller for where their hotshot owner, Arthur Blank, he's always looking for the next big splash to sell tickets. Look at their last couple drafts. Kyle Pitts, Drake London. I think they follow that trend and go ahead and select Bijan Robinson, even though they should, in my opinion, take an edge rusher because their defense has been hurting at that position for seems like a decade. But Falcons are going to Falcon. They're not the smartest organization, so I think that's where Bijan ends up. But where I want him is the Philadelphia Eagles, because in that offense, man, oh my gosh, he would be the best Eagles running back since Shady McCoy, because he might actually even be a little better, because he can. He has the complete 3-down skill set like Shady had, but it's like in that system though with Jalen Hurts, all the goal line opportunities he's going to have. I know Hurts is going to take some of those, but Hurts, the teams are going to start keying in on him near the goal line. They're not just going to keep making it easy on him. But if you had Bijan back there, though, then it's like, well, good luck. One of them's going to score. So I think with the Eagles, he would be great, because we all know how valuable touchdowns are in fantasy. I think he'd score at least 15 as a rookie in that system.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the pipe dream for any top running back prospect is the Eagles, as you can see with my one.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, you got want the Eagles, and you can see why. Because they don't really have any running backs on the roster that are capable. You got Rashad Penny, but he's always hurt. Kenneth Gainwell doesn't get it done on early down. So if they do draft the running back, they'll probably get a lot of work. But I see you have Gibbs, that is, going to the Bengals.
Yeah, what do you get someone who already has everything? I think there's been a lot of smoke around Joe Mixon during the offseason, and I just don't know how long that continues. I don't know how long that relationship stays there. He's a talented running back. He's going to demand a lot of money in his next contract, but he's also getting up there in age. I just don't know. I think the Bengals could go with someone who could do it all in Gibbs. I don't know when they'll get him, first round, second round. It really just depends. But I think he would make a lot of sense for a team like the Bengals. And as far as I kind of cheated a little bit. I don't think the Eagles will get Bijan. So I think he'll be gone by the time the Eagles pick first. So let's just take the next best running back. I want him in Philly, because that offense is built to succeed for any running back. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs is really talented.
Right. Yeah, the thing is, though, Philly's got the 10th pick as well as their 30th pick. So it's one of those things where they could get Bijan at 10 if the Falcons pass on him. But if the Falcons take him there at 8, then they might be able to get Gibbs at 30.
Mm-hmm.
So the path is realistic for either one, considering the Eagles have picks, 2 first-round picks. But we got a couple more running back prospects to break down here. Tajay Spears from Tulane and Zach Charbonnet from UCLA. Both have seen their stocks rise ever since the combine. Tajay, though, he's got, he went to Tulane. New Orleanians know and love him. He carried Tulane to the Cotton Bowl and just showed that he's a complete 3-down back in the right system. At the NFL level, though, probably profiles more as a 3rd-down back to start out, which is why I think he goes to the Saints. I really do. I'm not just saying that because he went to Tulane. I'm saying that because I think he's a good fit for the system with Alvin Kamara's looming suspension and looming just the fact that he might not even be on the Saints next year, in 24. I think he's stuck, at 23. No one's going to trade for him. He's stuck with the Saints at least for this year. But, I mean, if the Saints draft Tajay Spears, then that'd be a reason for him to move on from Kamara after this year because he'd have Spears and Jamal Williams. I think they'd form a really nice 1-2 punch. So it might not, if Kamara avoids a lengthy suspension, it might not lead to immediate production as a rookie, but I think long-term it's a good landing spot for him. So I think that's where he goes, and that's also where I'd like him to go. So a lot of times what I want doesn't transpire, but in this case, I hope it does. I think Spears would be not only a great fantasy player, it's a great fit for the Saints. He's already said he'd love to stay in New Orleans, and hopefully the Saints scouts feel the same and where they can select him. I'm hoping the 3rd round. Might have to take him in the 2nd, but I'm thinking the 3rd would be a good sweet spot there. But Charbonnet, I see, Gabe, you have coming down here to the Big Easy.
Yeah, let me ask you a question, Spencer. That stadium behind me, who does that stadium belong to?
That's Tiger Stadium, right?
Yes, it is. That's Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. As a Saints fan, I think you know this better than anyone else. The Saints don't love to draft the Louisiana boys. So that's why I have Charbonnet going to the Saints. For whatever reason, it just seems to make too much sense. All of these talented Louisiana prospects, they just never end up on the Saints, it seems. So that's, as much as Spears makes sense, I just don't see it happening. So that's my reasoning for Charbonnet going to the Saints, because let's face it, you know it, I know it, Jim knows it. Jim has told everyone the Saints need a running back. And I think Zach Charbonnet is one of the most talented in this draft. So I think that's where he ends up. As far as where I want him, I mean, come on. Zach Charbonnet just seems like a Raven already, doesn't he? He's an incredibly hard runner. He fits the bill for everything the Ravens want with a running back. And let's be honest, J.K. Dobbins doesn't always stay healthy. So, and they've been really itching in that running back room for a solid number 2. And I think Zach Charbonnet could be that guy. And I think if he's put into that offense in Baltimore, he could churn out a lot of yards.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'd be a good fit for the Ravens. I wouldn't mind that at all because, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards battled a lot of knee problems to where neither one of them is a reliable starting running back, in my opinion. So I would like Charbonnet there. I don't dislike him for the Saints. I wouldn't be mad at it. I just hope they don't take him over Tajay. If it's between him and Tajay, I really hope they go with him because I think that Louisiana thing, I think that was like a Sean Payton thing. I think that because last year in the offseason, the Saints brought in not one but 2 former LSU Tigers there, and Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, and Jarvis Juice Landry. The reason I think Sean Payton didn't like bringing in Louisiana guys because I think he felt like it'd be kind of a distraction. Like it'd be, they'd have all the press being like, he's former LSU and this and that, where I don't think that Dennis Allen really cares about that. I think the fact that I think Mickey Loomis probably was annoyed with Peyton about that, to where I think if they have the opportunity to bring in a local guy like Tajay Spears, I think they're going to jump on it because I think that was a Sean Payton thing. I think that was Peyton. So. I think that was one of the, as good as Sean Payton was, he had his flaws, and one of his flaws was that he had a big ego to where he wanted, like, it was like he didn't want any outside distractions, like, so And it's like, I mean, you got to go with the best talent. Like, you can't worry about all that. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm sure Peyton, if he's listening, probably like, what are you talking about? But I'm just saying, Sean, I see the trends. So we'll see. But I think if Tajay's there in the third round, the Saints I think they'll take him. But we'll see. I mean, a lot of big boards have Charbonnet over Spears, but I feel like they're really close. And to me, if it's close, give the tie to the local kid. Why not?
Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, moving on to wide receivers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, a future Texan, Gabe?
Hope so. I think this is one of the worst kept secrets in the draft. I think if JSN is there at 12, I think the Texans are dead set on taking him. He's what many people consider to be the best wide receiver in the draft, and the Texans desperately need a receiver to go with, hopefully not Will Levis.
Right, yeah, maybe C.J. Stroud, former teammates. I mean, if they take Stroud, it's like, hey, he might be able to team him up because if Stroud would fall, if the Colts take Levis, they might be able to take the defensive player. And I don't know about all that. They could get all three, but that would be I don't see that happening. So I think it's one of if they take Stroud early, then they'll get JSN. Or if they take defense early, they'll either take whichever quarterback falls, but if none of the quarterbacks are there, then they probably will still take JSN. And I guess I don't know who they'd take, a Hendon Hooker or somebody in the second or third round. It'd be, might have another year at Davis Mills.
Take Caleb Wilson and Drake May next year.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like, well, what if y'all improve with D'Amico Ryans to where y'all don't get a chance to take either? That's, to me, that's the flaw in that plan, in my opinion. I see the plan was to get number one pick this year, and y'all somehow managed to not do that. I mean, they basically pulled the same thing with the Jets, to where the Jets were in position to get Trevor Lawrence, and they butchered that to where now they're having to give up a bunch of stuff to try to hope for Aaron Rodgers bringing them to the promised land. So, I feel like the Texans kind of had the same blunder, where it's like it was the last week, too, the same scenario. It just, all you needed was one more loss, and yet you win the last week. To where it's like, what the hell? But I don't know. Tanking's a funny thing to get into.
Don't get me started on that. That's me cursing Lovie Smith. He knew he was a dead man walking, and he wanted to walk out, setting the place on fire. But I think as a fantasy owner and as a Texans fan, Smith and Jigba to the Texans makes me happy because he's going to get a share of the targets there, and he'll get his from day one.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't be mad at it. I think, though, he's slightly overrated. I think he's kind of limited to being a slot guy. I mean, in today's NFL, though, you want guys like that. I mean, Michael Thomas was an elite receiver despite being limited to kind of more like slants, the slot role. But I don't know. Maybe I think JSN might slip a little bit. But if the Texans want him at 12, they're probably going to take him. But Jordan Addison name I got on here, I'm thinking he's kind of similar to JSN. I'm thinking he goes to the Chargers, being that they could use another weapon over there. Plus, Keenan Allen's over 30. He was hurt a lot last year. I mean, and he was out. Justin Herbert just didn't have a whole lot to throw to. Mike Williams also injury prone. So, to me, they go with a receiver and Addison. But I would rather him go to the Bills, because the Bills, they also have wide receiver issues. And I feel like, though, their offense is a little more explosive there with Josh Allen. Not saying Justin Herbert's not explosive, but if Keenan Allen does stay healthy, then Addison won't have really a good path to targets. Where with the Bills, outside of Stephon Diggs, they don't have much. Gabe Davis he's nothing more than a deep threat, really. I mean, they tried to make him a focal point last year. It didn't work. So reports are that they're going receiver early. I don't think Addison will last to be picked by them, but if he is, boy, that'd be nice for fantasy. So moving on to the next couple of receivers here. Quentin Johnston, Gabe thinks is going to be a Colt. That'd be an interesting landing spot, but wants him in Detroit.
Yeah, he's the dude who has fallen in draft boards, and by no fault of his own. I think his falling draft stock is the result of Zay Flowers, the guy you're going to talk about next, just skyrocketing up. So Quentin Johnston is a guy I think you can get in the second round, and I think the Colts, the owners of one of the worst receiving corps in all of football, would really benefit from getting a deep threat like Johnston, who's just tall, physical receiver with good hands.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be a good spot. The Lions, yeah, I mean, it could work. It's just they took a receiver up high last year and Jamison Williams, so it'd be nice to add to their arsenal there, but I think they've got more pressing needs on the defensive side of the ball. But speaking of Zay Flowers, I think he ends up with the Giants because, I mean, the Giants still have a pretty bare receiving core. I mean, they made some signings this offseason, but it's more just like stopgap guys, like Paris Campbell, Jamison Crowder. They didn't make any big splashes. I think after the Kenny Galladay debacle, they want to stay away from free agent wide receivers. So I think Zay Flowers be a good fit over there, but I think he'd be an even better fit in Kansas City because the fact is the Chiefs need wide receiver help. I mean, they never replaced Tyreek Hill. I mean, they signed Marquez Valdes-Scantling and drafted Sky Moore last year, but neither one of them came even close to putting up the production Tyreek Hill did. So they also lost Jackson. I mean, I said Jackson Smith and Jing, but Juju Smith-Schuster, the other long name guy, he's with the Patriots now. So I think the Chiefs, if Flowers falls to him, I don't think he will at pick 31, but if he would, I think the Chiefs snatch him up and he'd be a great fit there and give Patrick Mahomes another weapon.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because what else they got? I mean, they got Kelsey, of course, but oh yeah, they signed Richie James. But I mean, Richie James, I mean, he's okay, but it's like, yeah, you could use some more help. But moving on to tight ends, Dalton Kincaid, the man I've been pounding the table for as far as being the next elite fantasy tight end, I think goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars because Doug Peterson, their head coach, really values the tight end position. Made Evan Ingram fantasy relevant again, but he's only on a 1-year franchise tag deal to where I think they, with this pick, get their tight end, their receiving tight end of the future, and Dalton Kincaid, who profiles very similarly to Doug Peterson breakout Zach Ertz from a few years back, to where I think Dalton Kincaid goes there. But I think the Jags would be a really good fit. But I'm going to be picky here and say I think I'd rather him to the Bengals because, let's be real, Joe Burrow in that offense, that's a lethal offense to where they might lose T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd in the next year or two, having to extend out Jamar Chase, or he can get another rookie weapon on a cheap rookie contract. Dalton Kincaid, I feel like would be a good fit.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, what do you get? A team who has everything, a good tight end, a tight end with high upside. And I think he would be a great addition to that great receiving core.
Facts. And then see Michael Mayer, our other name on here, who's him and Kincaid is going back and forth on who might be the first tight end taken. But another weapon for the Texans, man. If the Gabe's thinking the Texans are going to really stock up on offense this draft, but another want for the Raiders.
Yeah, no, I think, the Texans and Mayer have been linked, and I think the Texans have really lacked a strong tight end since C.J. Fedorowicz's surprising retirement. There's a guy I didn't think I'd be mentioning on this show today or ever. But I think Mayer to the Texans would make a lot of sense. I think, it's a guy the Texans could potentially trade up to get from that 33 spot. And I wouldn't be surprised if D'Amico Ryans pulled a Matt Rule. I don't know if you remember Matt Rule in his first year with the Panthers went all defense. I'm not going to say D'Amico Ryans is going to go all offense, but I think D'Amico Ryans knows that he's got enough pieces on defense right now where he just needs to load up on weapons for a young quarterback. And I think Mayer would make a lot of sense. So I could see that happening. As far as the Raiders, Jimmy G loves his tight ends. And I think Michael Mayer is a guy who could slot in. He wouldn't be expected to do too much because they've got that strong receiving core out there in Vegas. So I think there's low expectations. Just let him acclimate to the NFL. And I think Mayer would really benefit from going somewhere like the Raiders and replacing Darren Waller.
For sure. Yeah, just with the Jacoby Myers signing might be not as many targets up for grabs. So I see the logic behind it, but I personally think I think he ends up in Green Bay because they need tight end desperately. And I'd kind of want him there too because it's like outside of Christian Watson, what do they have? And Jordan Love will have to have somebody to lean on. And I think Michael Mayer could be a nice safety blanket for the young QB. As we all know, young quarterbacks tend to lean on their tight ends. So Yeah, I think that'd be a decent fit for not just the short term, but also the long term. Because if him and Love could build chemistry, it could be a good dynasty threat.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but yeah, before we get to our Gabe's rant about it, has something to do with dynasty leagues. Let's get to our fantasy baseball waiver wire pickup. So that was our, went over all the rookies there. Drop your comments, thoughts on where you see these rookies ending up before we sign off. But for those in fantasy baseball, we've got a couple waiver wire ads for y'all. I've got Josh Jung and the Rangers, young third baseman who's really crushing it. A power hitter there and has 5 bombs already. I think 14 RBIs. He's a guy that was a highly touted prospect, but kind of fell off the map, so to speak, because of injuries. But I think people are really sleeping on him. The Rangers are the real deal with Bruce Bochy as manager. There's new life there in Arlington. They've turned that ship around. They're a real contender for the AL West right now. So I'm thinking Josh Jung is a really good pickup right now. Only rostered in 20% of leagues. Get him now before the cat's out of the bag. And I see, Gabe, you've got a utility player there in Taylor Wells.
Yeah, no, I think Taylor Walls is a really good pickup. He's got the utility of being second base, third base, shortstop eligible. This is a guy who was hitting 172 last year. He made a lot of appearances with the Rays because he's obviously versatile. He can play any infield position. He's hitting 333 to start the year. So we're riding that wave. A good part of the way through the season, about 25, 30 games into the season. So I think we can say that this isn't a fluke yet. You can just pick him up. Mauricio Dubon was my guy last time who was getting hot from the plate. Why not pick up a utility guy in Taylor Walls who's hitting over 300, doesn't strike out a lot. He's only struck out 8 times this year, and he's got good discipline from the plate. He's walked 7 times as well. So those numbers are about even. This is the kind of guy you want in fantasy who can be playing every other day when your starters are not playing. They're either off for the day, they're injured. He's just a good guy to have on your fantasy baseball roster.
Yeah, that is Taylor Walls. My apologies there, because that just goes to show how he's just kind of an unknown. A guy that just was, like Gabe said, hit like 170 last year. A guy that was on nobody's radar, but with the Rays, they've been surprising people. It's safe to say they're no fluke. They have one of the best lineups in MLB. So another name to look out for, Harold Ramirez. I picked him up in my league recently. He's been hitting well, and Isaac Paredes, though, he was mine from last time. He's kind of cooled off. So just take note of that, y'all. Just be patient. Like, just because you pick somebody up doesn't mean it's a magic wand. But for someone like Walls, who's eligible at 3 positions, he's definitely worth a bench spot.
Yeah, and he's I noticed was one of the most picked up players this week in ESPN. Yeah, he's still available in about 75% of leagues. So,
yeah, because no one had him prior to that.
Yeah, exactly. So I would go get him quickly. If you're infield needy, if you need a utility guy, go get Taylor Walls.
For sure. Yeah, I'm surprised Josh Jung hadn't gotten more traction, man. Y'all are sleeping, man. The Rangers, that lineup. I'm not sure. I'm still not sold on their pitching, man. I don't think they're gonna do a whole lot come October because they're pitching DeGrom. I don't trust. They've got too many question marks. But their lineup looks nasty when healthy.
Yeah, that's what happens when you spend $500 million in free agency in 1 year.
Yeah, Marcus Semien. Shoot, they should have the fans Corey Seager. That guy's just so unreliable. Marcus Semien, though, that's a freaking. I got him in one of my leagues. He's the best second baseman in MLB right now. With Altuve hurt, Semien is just. Man, he's a freaking just home run, stolen base, RBI. He does it all. He's a 5-tool guy.
There you go. I was waiting for that prerequisite of with Altuve out.
Yeah, because, when healthy, Altuve is not far. You can make a case Altuve is still the number one. I'd say it's neck and neck between those two. But let's hear your rant, Gabe, because I know you've been holding this in all show, and we've been teasing it because he was talked about a lot in the quarterback segment. But Will Levis, why should dynasty managers and NFL teams stay the hell away from this guy?
The Will Levis love is a product of the NFL draft being too far away from the Super Bowl. Teams have had way too much time to overthink this. I mean, we're now talking about some stuff like people are making excuses for Will Levis. Oh, his receiving core wasn't great in college. Oh, his offensive line wasn't very good. Let's just go back to the fundamentals. Can he play the game of football? Will Levis is a good football player, but he's not number 2 pick good. Nowhere near it. These are just some of his career stats at Kentucky. 64.9% completion. He's got a good completion percentage. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. 46 touchdowns and 25 picks. Spencer, we're talking about a guy who doesn't even have a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio in college, being the number 2 pick. He threw for 300 yards twice last year against Youngstown State and against another non-Power 5 opponent. This is a dude with a supposed big arm. He can throw the ball far. He's accurate. But I haven't seen much that he can play the game of football at the level needed to be a number 2 pick. So I know we have a lot of listeners and viewers in Louisiana. So let's do a little player A, player B comparison real quick. So player A, we're talking for senior seasons only between player A and player B. Player A threw for 2,400 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. He had a 65% completion percentage. Player B, 2,463 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions with a 60% completion percentage. So we're talking about player A threw for less yards, had 3 more touchdowns, 8 more picks, and 5% higher completion. Player B threw for 400 more yards, about 60 more yards, 3 less touchdowns, 8 less interceptions, still 60% completion. Player A is Will Levis. He's a projected first rounder. Player B is Danny Etling, probably the most boring quarterback to come out of the NFL draft. I love Danny Etling as an LSU fan, but he was nothing special. He was a 7th round pick. Spencer, I know Will Levis is better physically than Danny Etling. I know he's got a big arm. I know he's slightly more accurate, but his decision-making is extremely poor. Will Levis struggles with turnovers. He's not got a great pocket presence. So if you're a dynasty owner, just because you see him going number 2, or if you're an NFL team, if you see him projected highly and you see teams like the Texans and the Colts circling around, don't make that same mistake. Don't make the same mistake that my team is probably about to make on Thursday. The greatest thing about Will Levis is that he played in a pro-style offense in college. That's the best thing about him. If he didn't play in a pro-style offense, we wouldn't be talking about him. He'd be a Stetson Bennett type of guy. Got a great arm. I think he'll be – I'm not saying he will be Stetson Bennett. He's better than Stetson Bennett. But Will Levis should not be anywhere near the top 10 in an NFL draft. And dynasty owners need to stay away from him because this guy turns the ball over far too much to be a productive fantasy player. And NFL teams just need to stay away as well.
Oh, yeah. That was a rant there, ladies and gentlemen. And you made good points, Gabe. I can't really argue with it because it's really, I mean, I know you had a lot of details there, and I appreciate that. But to me, the simple point here is that he's a turnover machine. I mean, look what happens to turnover machines. Jameis Winston benched after 3 games. Zach Wilson replaced by Aaron Rodgers. I mean, it's like if you're a turnover machine like that, just consistently throwing picks and fumbling the football, you're not going to last at the NFL level. The most important thing, I mean, you obviously got to have a big arm, but everyone's got a big arm. All the prospects have arms that can throw the ball 50 plus. I mean, it's like arm strength is like, I mean, if you're talking high school, then yeah, I mean, not every quarterback has a strong arm, but if we're talking college, like more specifically NFL draft level college quarterbacks, they all can throw the ball far enough. So all this arm strength crap, yeah, I'm tired of it. Will Levis I think he's going to be a bust. I mean, I don't think he's as bad as some make him out to be, but I think he's not a top 10 pick. Like you said, if he was going in a later range, he could be a value, but for as far as being where he's going to go, I don't really see it panning out. I think Anthony Richardson's got more potential because at least with Anthony Richardson, you kind of know going in that it's going to be a project. Where Will Levis, pro style offense, you're probably going to want to start him right away, and it's just almost he reminds me of Zach Wilson, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, a few years ago it was Zach Wilson throwing in shorts. This year it was Will Levis kneeling at the 50-yard line hitting the goalpost. Are you kidding me? When does that stuff become more important than actual tape in football games? And as someone who watched Will Levis last year, nothing stood out. Nothing. I mean, good quarterback, but not a top 2 pick, and definitely not worth a high dynasty pick.
No, I'll be right. I'll be glad for the 24 class. Hopefully, a lot of his underclassmen declare, because that's got potential to be a really fun QB class. This QB class, it's obviously better than last year's, but I have a feeling it's going to be another underwhelming one. Even Bryce Young, it's like he's so tiny as far as being an NFL guy. I mean, I think he's got all the tools to be successful, but it's like taking hits. Like, I don't know if can he take the hits to, and be able to last long term. I don't know. And then Stroud, I mean, the cognitive test thing, I'll be honest, it's a red flag. I mean, 18, like, I'm not saying he's a total idiot, but 18, it's alarmingly low. Assuming that's true. I mean, we don't know for sure if that's true, but I think the bottom line is that his decision making probably could use some work. And even though Will Levis's score is a lot higher, I mean, the tape shows that Will Levis is not a very good decision maker. And then Anthony Richardson is another one. The tape shows that he's got a lot of work to do. So this QB class has a lot of potential, but also a lot of bust potential.
I completely agree with you. I think Bryce Young is far and away the number 1 pick, and I think CJ Stroud's a comfortable 2 as well. But I mean, if you're a dynasty manager and you've got the option between Will Levis and Richardson, take Richardson.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, especially for fantasy, he's got a lot more upside because of the rushing. So anyway,
significantly younger. So I think Richardson's got a lot more upside, and even a lower floors or a higher floor as well.
Yeah, I agree. But we'll see how everything goes on Thursday. Who knows? All this Levis stuff might be smoke. He might tumble down the board. Richardson might touch. They might all fall. It might be a thing where defense goes higher. Guys like Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, Nolan Smith, Lucas Van Ness got it. It's just a nice edge rush class. And then you got Jalen Carter, although he could tumble too with his off-field concerns. The cornerback. I mean, this class is just. I mean, I know we got to end the show here. So one more thing before we sign off. The 23 class. I don't know how to think. I think it's going to be kind of a disappointing class. So in a way, I'm kind of glad the Saints don't have a high pick because I don't see this class being all what it's hyped up to be. But we'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll prove me wrong. NFL draft Thursday at 7:00. You won't want to miss our Bayou Bets draft show. It's going to be lit, 7:00, right when the draft starts. Zach and Jim will be on. Gabe will make appearances. I'm going to make appearances live from the Saints facility at Airline Drive, and we're also going to have our team of Saints beat writers, Jeff Duncan, Luke Johnson, Rod Walker, and Taryn Walk making appearances all throughout the night. So we'll see how it goes, y'all. The NFL draft is a couple days away. For Spencer the Guru Urquhart and Gabe Henderson, this has been Fantasy Roundup. Thank y'all again for watching.